For numerous years, it was difficult to escape narratives about the imminent global dominance of this nation. With its unstoppable economic engine, extravagant skyscrapers, and bustling megacities, it seemed like the next superpower that would shape the future of our planet. However, everything took a turn for the worse one day. While you may have heard a similar version of this story about China, almost 3 decades ago, Japan was the subject of an identical tale that captivated the world. Just like China, Japan underwent an extraordinary economic miracle. It was on the verge of surpassing the United States as the world's largest economy when its economic bubble burst, leading the country into what became known as the Lost Decades. The parallels between China and Japan are striking, as we have already witnessed China's rise, economic challenges, the collapse of its real estate market, and the demographic crisis in Japan. While we cannot predict the future with certainty, the events that unfolded in Japan might provide us with some insight into what lies ahead for China. If history is any indication, it may not be a favorable outcome. Therefore, examining Japan's trajectory can offer valuable lessons about China's future. However, the impact of China's situation extends far beyond its borders. This brings us to our sponsor, Ground News, which can shed light on the extensive reach of China's influence. Ground News is an app and website that gathers news articles from around the world, providing a comprehensive context about the sources of information. It is a valuable tool for understanding complex topics such as the economy or migration. I found a particularly intriguing story on Ground News about the increasing number of Chinese nationals crossing the U.S. border from Mexico. This is a unique perspective on migrants that we don't often hear about. The story is based on information from 24 different sources, offering a well-rounded overview. Below, you will find a detailed account of what each source is conveying. One source provides valuable insights into China's economy, discussing the unemployment rate, stock markets, and real estate. Another source from CBS sheds light on how Chinese migrants are utilizing TikTok in their efforts to cross the border. The unique feature of Ground News is that it presents different perspectives on the same story, highlighting the political leaning, ownership, and reliability of each source. This allows me to gain a comprehensive understanding of the real story, free from the influence of a single source. This is precisely why I believe Ground News can greatly assist anyone seeking to comprehend complex issues without bias towards any particular side. I encourage you to visit Ground News/explain to subscribe and explore it for yourself. By using my link, you can avail a 30% discount or try it for less than $1 this month. Now, let's return to the video. I have created an entire video discussing the events in Japan, but let me provide a simplified version of what occurred starting from the 1950s. At that time, Japan was impoverished and under occupation after the Second World War. However, it underwent a remarkable transformation, experiencing 3 decades of rapid economic growth. This propelled Japan to become the world's second-largest economy and a prominent exporter and manufacturer of advanced technology for a considerable period. The United States viewed this development favorably, as Japan was an important trading partner and a successful example of democratic and economic transition. However, concerns, apprehension, and panic eventually arose due to Japan's seemingly unstoppable rise. In the 1980s, the United States came to the realization with alarm that Japan was outperforming them in various sectors that they had previously dominated. Japan was manufacturing cars, electronics, and consumer goods that were not only of superior quality but also much more affordable compared to their American counterparts. Furthermore, Japanese brands were gaining popularity worldwide, including in the United States, surpassing American products in terms of consumer preference. Additionally, Japanese businesses seemed to have an endless supply of funds, which they utilized for extensive shopping sprees globally, particularly in the U.S., acquiring assets ranging from real estate to entertainment studios and factories. This sparked concerns that Japan might eventually acquire the entire country, leading to fears of complete Japanese dominance over the U.S. economy. The key factor behind Japan's remarkable success lay in the fact that they operated under slightly different regulations than other countries. The Japanese economic boom was primarily attributed to the collaboration between massive corporate alliances known as Risu and the Japanese government. These cartels, comprising the largest Japanese corporations, held shares in each other and, despite being formally independent, cooperated to support one another. Moreover, the major corporations received preferential treatment from the government in the form of substantial loans, enabling them to undersell products, expand overseas, and inflate the Japanese stock and real estate markets. However, in the early 1980s, the bubble of artificially inflated Japanese economy burst. Within a few years, the entire system began to crumble as the economic miracle turned out to be largely illusory. The inflated stock and real estate markets collapsed, and a substantial portion of the economy was exposed to be sustained by zombie companies that would have gone bankrupt years ago if not for the continuous supply of cheap money. Consequently, the 3 decades of growth were followed by 3 decades of stagnation, which became known as the lost decades in Japan. Moreover, those unfortunate enough to embark on their professional journeys during this period were labeled as the lost generations. Astonishingly, this narrative bears striking resemblance to the story of China. China, too, witnessed 3 decades of rapid economic growth, transforming into a major manufacturing hub and establishing its own domestic brands of automobiles, electronics, and consumer goods. It successfully exported these products to markets worldwide, much like Japan. China began investing colossal sums of money globally, supported by financial backing from its government, mirroring Japan's trajectory. It appeared inevitable that China would eventually surpass the United States as the leading global economy, just as Japan had once seemed poised to do. However, similar to Japan, after 3 decades of unprecedented economic expansion, it now appears that the entire system is on the verge of collapse. Yet, this is merely the beginning of the similarities. One of the key factors that enabled the Japanese economy to sustain its growth for such a prolonged period was the continuous influx of government funds. Interestingly, this is precisely why China's economy has also been able to thrive for an extended duration. A significant portion of China's GDP growth in the past 2 decades can be attributed to massive state investments in infrastructure and real estate. Whenever the economy experienced a downturn, the Chinese government resorted to injecting more funds into the economy and constructing additional infrastructure and real estate. However, this approach eventually became less effective than before. Concurrently, the level of debt in the Chinese economy grew exponentially. When the Chinese government attempted to regulate the debt level, it resulted in the collapse of the property market. Consequently, the pace of Chinese growth significantly decelerated, resembling the situation in Japan. Nevertheless, does this imply that China's future will mirror Japan's trajectory? Perhaps, but it could potentially be even worse for China due to the fact that, despite some differences between the two countries, these disparities mostly work against China rather than in its favor. Specifically, there are 3 key distinctions that place China in a significantly more unfavorable position than Japan. Firstly, when Japan's economic bubble burst in the mid-1990s, Japan was already an extensively developed economy. In fact, it was one of the wealthiest nations at that time, with a GDP per capita nearly 50% higher than that of the United States, along with a high quality of life and standard of living. The crisis occurred when Japan was far ahead of other countries, which is why it remains the 3rd largest economy, despite experiencing a decline since the 1990s. On the other hand, China finds itself in a completely different scenario. Despite successfully lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, it still stands as a middle-income economy, with a GDP per capita comparable to that of Mexico. If China's economy were to significantly slow down at this juncture, it would be in a much more precarious situation than Japan was 30 years ago, even if the slowdown was not as severe as Japan's. Secondly, it appears that in recent years, China's leadership has made a deliberate decision to sacrifice some of its economic growth in exchange for emphasizing ideology and pursuing a more assertive foreign policy. China has taken strict measures against its domestic tutoring and video game companies, as well as targeting foreign businesses operating within its borders. Concerns about a potential invasion of Taiwan and a military conflict with the United States have added to the worries. Consequently, foreign capital is rapidly leaving the country due to the perception that it is no longer a safe, stable, and predictable investment destination. Although China's reliance on foreign capital has diminished, this exodus is still detrimental to the economy, creating additional challenges and strains that Japan does not have to contend with. Furthermore, China is also facing a demographic crisis. While Japan has long been grappling with a shrinking and aging population, there are indications that China's demographic situation could be even more severe. Japan's population growth significantly slowed down in the 1990s, but it continued to grow until reaching its peak in 2008. Since then, it has been declining at a relatively gradual pace. However, China's population is expected to experience a full-blown crisis rather than just a decline. China reached its population peak in 2022, and its decline has been more rapid than anywhere else. In 2023 alone, its population dropped by nearly 3 million, accompanied by record-low birth and fertility rates that are now comparable to those of South Korea, among the lowest in the world. This decline is projected to accelerate further as China's population continues to age and shrink by millions of people each year. Consequently, there will be a greater demand for elderly care, while fewer individuals will be contributing to the pension system, leading to its depletion by 2035 if no changes are made. Moreover, the economy will face immense pressure due to the declining consumer base and labor force, even without considering any other issues China may have. The demographic crisis alone presents a significant challenge, and when combined with the multitude of other problems, it creates a nearly perfect storm. It is important to note that China's economy is still experiencing decent growth, averaging around 5% per year. Although this is slower compared to its previous rates, it still surpasses the global average. However, it is expected that China's growth will continue to slow down in the coming years, including next year. While it may not experience the same complete stagnation as Japan, the gradual decline in growth, given China's circumstances, would still have negative consequences. Looking ahead, it is possible that in 30 years, we will reflect on why we ever believed China would become the next superpower.